I recognise that there has been a surge of discontent this year, so I am really glad to be here today to talk about that and about any aspects of inspection and accountability that you want to talk to me about. We've built a new evidence-based inspection framework that really does have wide support in the sectors we inspect, and we know that the conception of quality it embodies is respected and valued in schools. Within the limits of government policy, which gives Ofsted only a diagnostic role, we've reframed the process of inspection with professional dialogue at its centre to make it as valuable and valued at the receiving end as we can. We've improved and extended the scope of inspector training. We've done this to make sure that all inspectors have the same platform of up-to-date knowledge of education as well as a good understanding of the framework. We make sure that inspectors really understand the importance of consistent application of the framework. And we've reinforced all the other quality assurance mechanisms that help bring high levels of consistency to a human judgment process. And we've got good evidence of all of these. With school results once again available to us after a 2-year gap, we can also see that the overall relationship between school inspection outcomes and published results is just as strong as it was under the previous framework.
Working off a strong evidence base requires consistency, and obviously we've heard a lot of debate and concern from academic circles, particularly about the consistency and reliability of inspection judgments. You've talked a bit about training, but what other steps does Ofsted take to ensure that inspectors are as consistent as possible in making their judgments, and what research have you undertaken to assess the level of consistency?
There are a lot of different aspects of consistency, first of all. There's consistency between inspectors, consistency with other measures, consistency of process, and people tend to conflate those when they're talking about inspection. How do we achieve consistency in a human judgment process? First, by having a strong construct of quality in a well-evidenced framework. Secondly, by recruiting people who've got the right knowledge and experience and the right temperament for inspecting. How you do it matters. Training them really well. They need formal training sessions. They also need time working with and observing peers. You align standards in a human judgment process by people being with each other and calibrating relative to others. You give them good support on inspection, making sure that when they encounter tricky issues, they can always talk to colleagues on site or to colleagues on a duty desk, that they really feel that the whole organisation is wrapped around them when they come across anything they're not totally confident in dealing with. Having good moderation and quality assurance processes, especially for the judgments that carry the most consequences. So we know how much weight the inadequate judgment carries, so we have a whole extra layer of quality assurance. No, a single inspector never makes that judgment off their own bat. There is always extra quality assurance before that, even the provisional judgment is given. Our model is absolutely built around getting the highest sort of consistency.
What does the evidence tell us about how consistently the education inspection framework is applied, and what impact does this have on the reliability of inspection judgments?
We would like inspections to be reliable. They're high stakes for schools. We'd like 2 different teams to reach the same judgments. We have very little evidence on this, actually, which is remarkable given that Ofsted's been going for 30 years. We have a study from about 5 years ago from Ofsted where they sent 24 previously good schools. They sent 2 inspection teams to each of those and checked whether they reached the same conclusion. They conducted the inspection independently. And they found that in 92% of cases, they agreed on the judgment of does this remain a good school or not. That's quite high, it's quite good, but there's a couple of things to think about there. One is, on a binary judgment like that, if they all flipped a coin, they'd agree 50% of the time, right? So that's the baseline. And the second point is, in a short inspection like that with a good school, the presumption going in is that the school remains good, and they look for evidence to sort of overturn that. And so in an attempt to make some progress on this, colleagues and I, Christian Bokhoff and John Jerem, have tried to sort of scrape together as much data as we can from inspection reports, from the internet, from charities, to try and test this further. And we've looked at simple questions like, does the judgment reached in an inspection correlate with things that it shouldn't correlate with, like, for example, the gender of the lead inspector, where we find that controlling for the Progress 8 score of the school and the school's previous inspection judgment, so these are schools that look very similar in terms of how well they're doing, 6% of inspections led by a female inspector reach an inadequate judgment, and 4% of those led by male inspectors. And this difference is too big to be accounted for by chance, but with the simple data that we've managed to gather, it's hard for us to dig into that any further. We've looked at, does the inspector's prior inspection judgment correlate with their current inspection judgment? Does the school you've just been to colour your views of the one you're at now? Where we again find one of these kind of hard to explain findings that shouldn't really be there, such that if the inspector reached an inadequate judgment in their previous inspection, that happens in sort of 3 to 5% of cases, the odds of them reaching an inadequate judgment in the current inspection are about 40% lower. Again, this is and this holds controlling for outward indicators of the quality of the school, Progress 8, and so on. And this again is a big difference. It can't be explained by chance. We need Ofsted to release more of their data. It's quite remarkable to me that a publicly funded body in 2023 doesn't release their data in a secure and safe way to qualified researchers. And we also need Ofsted to run more of these, 2 inspection teams going to the same school type studies. Only they can do that. In particular, we need them for schools that were previously outstanding, schools that were previously inadequate, and so on, so that we get a full sense of the reliability of inspections.
I just wanted to ask as well, because one other concern we've had raised, particularly from academic circles, was that the research into consistency of inspections is made more difficult by the lack of available data. And as a public organisation, they feel that the data ought to be more publicly available to allow for that research.
I will say that I think this is completely unreasonable. We make a tremendous amount available. We publish every month a spreadsheet which has every detail of every inspection. We think what we're being asked for goes beyond what it's reasonable to give about our individual inspectors. But we put out an enormous amount of data. We know, it's right that people cut it and investigate it in all sorts of ways. And the difference is that they manage to sort of hypothesize a very small indeed, in the context of a human judgment, sort of really, really small, and actually give reassurance that all the control processes we've got are working well.
The big issue for Ofsted is whether we have good enough inspectors and whether there is consistency in the inspection system, whether the inspections are secure, consistent, and whether they are led and by good enough people.
There's not the adjacent issue, which is then the training of Ofsted inspectors. And there's a particular issue here, I think, where obviously quite a few school leaders, I think it's something like 40% of Ofsted staff are current serving school leaders. Now, they have access to materials and to training that other school leaders don't. And we think that's really problematic, because what that means is that they essentially have the inside track of that. Now, we have called on Ofsted to publish all of their training materials, all of their resources, videos of their training to Ofsted inspectors, so it's out there in the public domain. Because otherwise what happens is you have these sort of cottage industries of people saying, this is what Ofsted expects. Or you have what happened about 18 months ago, some of those materials circulating online which were actually out of date and therefore are very, very unhelpful. And actually, if Ofsted kept a current record and a current publication of those resources that all school leaders could access fairly, that would be really helpful. Because, of course, if you're a small primary school, you can't afford to have one of your deputy heads, if you have a deputy head, go off and be an Ofsted inspector every term.
One of the other concerns that we've had expressed to us is that school leaders who also work as Ofsted inspectors have got an unfair level of access to the relevant materials and can therefore ensure that their schools are steered in the right direction when Ofsted arrives. And if all of those materials were available to everybody, that unfair and unlevel playing field situation would not arise.
Yeah, and that I'm afraid is a bit of a myth. What this is all about, we publish So first of all, the frameworks and handbooks were extremely transparent. All the curriculum research reviews from which the curriculum training is done, a whole series of videos, blogs, webinars covering everything that we train inspectors in. We put it out in a form that is suitable for self-service use. What some people particularly want is the specific materials that are used in our interactive training sessions. If we simply dumped those slides out as people would like, well, we would get, firstly, the sort of consulting industry picking them up and ramping up the Moxted industry even further. And secondly, we would get some terrible bastardizations of people using stuff that they weren't trained for.